So I'm reviewing some of the principles of practicing, and before we actually get into the live fire drills, it's critically important that you understand some of the principles behind what we're doing. And training or practicing is only as good as the principles you apply when you're training or practicing. So let's define some things. First of all, purpose. Whenever you do a training drill of any kind, and we have dry fire drills and live fire drills in your defensive rifle training program, those drills must have a purpose. And I have been to ranges all over the U.S. and I've shot with guys and gals and trained with them, and oftentimes they're like, hey Mike, do this drill with us. And I'll do the drill, it'll be a great drill, probably a fun drill, and I'm going to ask them, hey guys, what is the why behind your drill? What's the purpose behind it? Well, it's a drill where we're going to shoot 3 shots and we're going to run and we're going to shoot 3 more shots. Here's the bottom line. Whenever you're doing a training drill, you're myelinating a nerve pathway, you're creating a habit. So that drill must have a purpose. And in defensive context, that purpose must be to produce some sort of skill that you can apply in that environment. So make sure your training drills have a purpose. So number 2, manipulation. Anytime we manipulate the rifle, and that literally means, working the bolt, trigger, safeties, mechanical devices on the rifle, performing reloads, any manipulation technique will typically be done in dry fire. And remember, we have a series of dry fire drills and we have a series of live fire drills. Dry fire drill practice builds your manipulation skill, and literally you could do it ad nauseum. You could do it as much as you want. It's free. It can be done in any environment. Live fire practice, however, is where we literally learn how to shoot better. That's where we're learning how to manage the trigger, manage the sight system, and manage the recoil of the rifle. So differentiate your skill or your practice between dry fire and live fire and understand the difference between the two. Number 3, context. If I grab a rifle in the middle of the night, typically I'm going to grab my 14-inch JP or 16-inch JP rifle. I'll probably sling it on my body, and I might have a handgun on if I'm already in my home. It wouldn't make much sense, however, if I did most of my training with an outside the waistband holster or wearing a plate carrier or had a big drop bag for my magazines, because that's not how I normally operate. Now, if you're a military guy or a guy that has a patrol rifle in your patrol car, that makes sense. But the point is, in context, you want to train with the gear you're actually going to use in a manner that you're actually going to use it. And too often, I show up to a rifle class, and for some reason, in most rifle classes, it actually cracks me up. Guys and gals show up with more gear and kit on than they would ever have in their home, bedroom, and or in their vehicle if they were to deploy a rifle. So if you're like me, probably a civilian defensive shooter that has a defensive rifle, make sure you're training in context. And of course, if you are a military operator or in the police department with whatever agency, well, then train with the gear you're going to use in the fight. Number 4, correct. Every single thing I do in practice, every movement writes a pattern in my brain. It basically ingrains a skill. It's called myelination. Basically, every time I fire a signal down a nerve pathway, it myelinates that pathway and it becomes a stronger pathway for a signal. So it builds habits. So every time I do something, if I practice anything, one small detail of a technique wrong over and over and over again, guess what? Under stress, that's exactly what I'm going to get out of the technique. So when you're practicing, make sure you're doing everything correct. And of course, when we're talking about correct, the book itself has a technique section that's going to teach you everything you want to know about technique, the whys behind the technique, and how I believe in operating any rifle system. When you're doing your training drills, make sure you're doing them correct. Number 5, consistency. And consistency is with your gun and your gear and how you're utilizing it, of course. But most importantly, if I'm doing a training drill, let's say it's any live fire drill, and I'm practicing that live fire drill with a pack timer, meaning a timer that makes a sound and it measures the amount of time it takes me to do whatever skill. To really be able to measure those metrics, I always want to look at my accuracy and speed, and they should be balanced. But I always want to be able to shoot at a certain level of accuracy with a certain level of speed. And the faster I can do some sort of technique, the better I am. So to measure my skill improvement, I want to make sure that I'm staying consistent. So if the drill is a 15-yard drill, for example, and then I practice it the next time at 20 and 30 yards, well, I can't ever look at my old times and compare them to my new times to see, hey, am I getting better, staying the same, or potentially getting worse? So stay consistent with your drills. Failure point cycle. The failure point cycle is basically a training cycle that we're going to go through, or a practice cycle we're going to go through that will allow us to show where we're failing on the technique. So if you think about things as a measurable level of accuracy, so for defensive training, If I can put combat effective hits on target, I'm good. The faster I can do that, the better I am. However, there's a certain point where I'm going to try to manipulate the rifle or shoot it or mount it or do whatever, and I'm going to fail. I'm going to throw a shot outside that area or off target. What I want to do when I hit that failure point is I want to identify, hey, why am I failing at this point in this technique? Fix it mechanically or mentally, make sure I ingrain a proper fix, and then continue to cycle again. So I'm always pushing through a cycle of pushing to the point where I fail, identifying the reason for my failure, fixing it, continuing to push hard until I fail again. So it's a cycle. And that cycle will constantly cause you to get better and better and better and better. Last but not least, number 7, if everything is a priority, then nothing is. And primarily in the practice sessions that I'm going to assign to you in this program, you're going to be assigned 1 to 2 drills. And the reason for that is I don't want you thinking about drill number 8, 9, or 10. I want you to think about one training drill, the technique it's designed to teach you, and mastering that drill so you really improve on your technique and whatever you got to do on that particular drill. And only then will we go on to the very next drill. So remember, if everything is a priority, nothing is. Prioritize your training. Let's go shoot.